It's our coverage of the election 2020 petition here on JoyNews. You can get interactive with the hashtag election petition on all of our social media handles. Let's go back to the Supreme Court and join my colleague Kweku Asante. So Kweku Asante is outside the court and he will tell us what's happening there. Kweku Asante, if you can hear me, can you explain to us what's happening outside, specifically reaction to what we've witnessed in the main courtroom today?
Right, Mama V. So just outside the Supreme Court room, there's a pack of journalists who have been stationed under a shed as they also monitor proceedings from within. And so most media houses brought journalists, some of whom have been divided, some of whom are inside the Supreme Court building itself, while some of us are outside monitoring proceedings. So right from when the former president, the petitioner in this action, John Dramani Mahama, came in, and a number of other people have also joined. I've seen a free anchor around in a bit. Of course, the Judicial Service promised that we're going to make TV screens available outside for those who are not able to get inside to be able to watch proceedings and monitor from outside. That has not been done yet. We are getting indications that those will be done in the course of the week or in the course of the hearing. And so outside is a pack of journalists who are all reporting for their media houses, as well as some lawyers who were not granted access into the Supreme Court building. And for this particular hearing, the access is really, really restricted in there because of security reasons as well as the COVID-19. And so if you are not a party to this action, most likely you are not going to get access to the down part of the Supreme Court, where the petitioners, the respondents are all seated, as well as their representatives. Well, above is where the media, the men are also sitting. And so if you're not part of all these groups identifiable, you will not be allowed access inside. And so you'd have to come inside, come and be outside and monitor proceedings from a small studio monitor that's been put outside for the sound from the Supreme Court to be passed outside. And so that is currently the action here, just outside the Supreme Court premises. And like I told you, I just saw around very few moments ago the director of elections for the NDC, the person of Elvis Efianka. I've not seen so much of MPP big works, MPP officials, NDC reps, as well as leaders are all around, and in terms of monitoring the proceedings from outside. Mama.
Okay, all right, Kweku Asante, we would leave it here. Keep monitoring what's happening outside the Supreme Court. So we'll come back to you a bit later on for some more reactions. So inside the courtroom, we've got Joseph Akabli. Outside the courtroom, we have Kweku Asante, who will be reporting from there for us. In the studio, Daniel Datsi joined me. We'll just go over what has happened before this recess. Daniel Datsi, you've been monitoring just as all of us have been doing on this second hearing of the petition, 2020 election petition. What are the initial notes that you've made that you can share?
Well, Mama V, first of all, we are not the only ones who've been monitoring. The entire nation has really come to a standstill looking at the Supreme Court. A lot of interest being generated. I've been especially, of course, you've done a great job of going over the broad strokes, the motion that was filed by the lawyer for John Dramani Mahama, Chashi Chikata, the response by the lawyer for the Electoral Commission, and of course, that interjection there by Akoto Ampao, who is lawyer of current president, Akufo-Addo. I've actually been scanning through social media, looking at how the Supreme Court's NDC election petition and a number of others, it's trending like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm finding 5 different trends related to this on Twitter. I'm seeing about 5.8 thousand people watching the conversation we are currently having on Facebook. The entire nation is very interested in this. Understandably so. This court proceedings, Procedural Mama V, will determine who is president after 42 days. And it looks like it's off to a very exciting start because, as you were explaining earlier, the actual trial has not begun, but there's still some controversy over what exactly the lawyers for John Dramani Mahama can ask and what they cannot ask, even before the pre-trial conference begins. So those are the few initial comments that I can make. General interest really in this matter. And I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Absolutely, I can't wait as well. But one of the other matters to be determined will be the request to admit facts, which they are yet to touch on. But I'm just going to take you through some of the questions. And on the face of it, it looks rather very obvious. So the first one is that's the purported declaration of the presidential election results of 7 December 2020 by Mrs. Jean Mensah, the chairperson of the first respondent on the 9th of December, was broadcast live on radio, television, and other electronic media. The second one is what they say is Exhibit A attached to the petition, which is a video and audio recording of the purported declaration in respect of the presidential election results. That's also one that they want the Electoral Commission to admit. That's Mrs. Jean Mensah, the chairperson, has made no other purported declaration in respect of the presidential election result of 7th December. Point 4 is that while making the purported declaration of the presidential election result of 7th December on 9th December, Mrs. Jean Mensah, the chairperson, stated that, and they didn't quote the entire statement, but it goes on to say the total number of valid vote cast was 13,434,574, representing 79% of the total registered voters. That while making the purported declaration, Mrs. Jean Mensah said the NPP obtained 6,730,413 votes, representing 51.595% of the total valid vote cast. That Mrs. Jean Mensah also stated in the purported declaration that currently, and that's a quote, the election results we have declared exclude that of Techiman South constituency, unquote. 7 is that Mrs. Jean Mensah gave a figure of 128,018 as the voter population of Techiman South constituency. Point 8 is that adding the voter population of Techiman South constituency to the total valid votes of 13,434,574 valid votes announced by Mrs. Jean Mensah amounts to total valid votes of 13,562,592. The ninth one, and this is a lot of facts that they want admitted, I must say, because it's 18. I've just read a bit of that 18 facts that they want admitted. That's yet to be touched on by the courts. We're only dealing with one of the matters currently, and we haven't closed that yet. So that's for leave to serve interrogatories. That's pretty different from the other matters that they've raised, really. This would require, if this is granted, that we will find, and specifically we'll find the returning officer in the presidential elections, in this case, Madam Jean Mensah, come up to answer these specific questions. In the meantime, we've seen, Daniel Darcy, that there's an affidavit in opposition, which is really responding to the questions raised by lawyers for John Dramani Mahama, which is a response. Point 1 to 3, the Electoral Commission has said that those answers are irrelevant as it is in accordance, what is stated is in accordance with the public election regulation. But we've seen that Mr. Chikata has strongly disagreed to that. Point 4.5, again, the Electoral Commission in its response to the interrogatories, the questions there, say that those are also irrelevant. So point 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So, you know, we're getting into a really interesting period where we'll see what exactly the court would say. Yeah,
really. If you look at point 9, for instance, Mamavi, what the former president is basically asking the Electoral Commission to do is to admit that there has been a grave error and admits that there's an actual difference. Because earlier, you would see that they said in point 5, while making the purported declaration of the presidential election results of 7th December, on 9th December, Mrs. Jean Mensah stated that the second respondent of the MPP obtained 6,730,413, representing 51.595%. And they go and say in point 9 that the first respondent's votes as announced by Mrs. Jean Adukwe-Mensah, the chairperson of the first respondent, in her declaration actually amounts to 49.625%. So if an admission is made of 0.5 and 0.9, what the NDC or John Mahama is asking the Electoral Commission to do, the Electoral Commission boss Jean Mensah to do, is to admit that there was a mistake back then. Of course, this has been argued over and over again by lawyers throughout this process that, yes, a mistake was made and a correction was made, and so we should look at the correction that was made. However, of course, the legality of that correction is what has been brought into question. And it's up to the Supreme Court to make the final decision on the effect of what that error that was made by the Electoral Commission itself and what it means for the declaration. I'm also very curious, Mama V, to see what would happen with the addition of Techiman South. Because again, that is something that happened. We did see Jean Mensah announce that Techiman South's results cannot make a difference in the results that she was announcing on that day. And that is something that the NDC has disputed strongly, looking at the figures that they used, in which is what they say amounted to an arithmetic error. So I also really want to see what the courts will decide. First of all, will the NDC be even allowed to hold these facts? I mean, will Mr. Mahama be allowed to hold these facts as he presents them today? And is this the beginning of what we should see, a different trajectory of this case as far as Mr. Mahama and his lawyers, led by Mr. Chikata, are concerned? I don't know what you think about that, but it looks very interesting. The last time I spoke to Haruna Idrisu, he actually told me that they have computed all the votes from the 275 collation sheets across the country. They came to a very different figure, a figure not looking too differently from what has been presented here in point 9. So I'm waiting to see really how that will be pushed forward, how that will be argued.
Well, you know, from the entire procedure, I guess when they started, it was very heated. I mean, very tensed, but there was a short, brief moment of laughter when one of the judges sought to correct the pronunciation of Madam Jean Mensah. And I restrict myself to only saying Jean Mensah, but there's a middle name that Chacha Chikata was obviously pronounced rather properly. And we had, Adukwe and Adukwe.
So apparently Adukwe is for male.
For male, yes. So that was a point where Chacha Chikata bowed to the superior knowledge of the judges. He said, I bow to the superior knowledge.
He said superior local knowledge.
Yes, of my lord.
But you have to understand, like I said, he's from Keta. And then he skipped Keta and came to Cape Coast to school. And then he went back to Accra. Yeah. He came back to Accra for university. So by the time he came to Accra, he was a full-grown man.
So I really hope, Daniel, because it gets really serious, it gets really tense, and you know that this is serious business because one party is seeking to overturn an election result and get into a runoff, which would mean that nobody won the election. Basically, that's the argument here. But I would love to see more of these moments where the tensions are either eased by some little laughter, you know.
So things can simmer down a little whilst we decide the future of the country.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea, Mama V. It's not a bad idea at all.
You know, before we got here, there were some lawyers who were arguing that perhaps the panel should have been 9, just as we saw in the 2012 elections. There were those who were still a bit hopeful that even though the initial application to amend errors was handled by these 7 lawyers, today there would be a change. But as Joseph Akabli reported for us, and as we've seen, even though we can't see their faces clearly, we still have that 7-member panel dealing with this matter. So that, I guess, is done. We can't go back to that conversation any longer.
It looks
we have a 7-member panel dealing with this petition. Despite
the questions raised by Dr. Abdul Basit Bamba, I watched that interview that he had on the AM show with you. And, you know, the principle with which he was speaking is not something that is strange, I must say. When you were looking at, for instance, in the run-up to the US election last year, Donald Trump had the then President Donald Trump, he's still president for one more day. He had the opportunity to appoint a Supreme Court judge when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. In fact, it even goes all the way back to when he had to appoint some Supreme Court judges after some passed. And The question that was raised was that he now has the opportunity to appoint Supreme Court judges whose political leanings, whose legal ideology or inspiration is similar to his. And so you would have more conservatives there. If there's a landmark Supreme Court case like an election petition, for instance, it could go to his favor. President Akufo-Addo also had the opportunity to appoint about 4 or 5 Supreme Court judges. And so, again, that question was raised, including the Chief Justice, 2 Chief Justices, I must say, in President Akufo-Addo's very short 4-year tenure. He's had a very busy Supreme Court, if you ask me. And the Chief Justice did make that decision to pick people. I know that in Ghana, we do not necessarily analyze the political leanings of judges and see how it affects their decisions. The only person who tried that was
Raymond Atuguba tried that.
Was our good friend Raymond Atuguba. He was told off basically by then Chief Justice Tufa Ekufu, and I've never seen her react in the way that she has before.
We didn't see the full publication of that research.
No, that research, but
which was interesting, by the way, because elsewhere these are common conversations that they would have.
Thank you very much, and I think that is something that should have been looked at. You see, the uniqueness in Ghana's situation is, first of all, there's no moratorium. There's no cap on the number of Supreme Court judges we can have. So any president can come and appoint as many as possible. After that, the Chief Justice is then given the authority, basically the carte blanche, to appoint the number of judges who will sit on any number of cases. That's according to the Chief Justice's, I wanted to say discretion. Of course, it will be wise to pick an odd number so that there's no even split.
So we could have seen 5 in this instance.
Yeah, we could have seen 5, we could have seen 11, we could have seen 13. So the amount of carte blanche that is given to the Chief Justice and the President in Ghana is what makes it a bit questionable. Because if indeed what Abdul Basit Bamba said is true, and that judges will decide according to who appointed them, then he would have a case.
Not blankly. He didn't put an emphatic statement that they would decide.
I put a big if in front of what I said.
Okay, because, so not specifically to the effect that they would decide on a case based on who appointed them, but it was just the perception of a fair and balanced panel in terms of who appointed them. You get it, but not the substance of their judgments. The reasoning of their judgment.
Yeah, but then again, there was that response by former information minister and one of the spokespersons for the MPP's legal team, that is Kojo Nkrumah, making a point about how even that the day before that interview, the EC and the president's lawyers had made an application opposing some parts of the amendments that the Chachikata-led John Mahama team wanted to make. And they lost, basically, in that they were ruled against. So if indeed this 7-man panel is tilting towards President Akufo-Addo in terms of political ideology, then they have already failed in their first mandate, which, by the way, is what we are seeing in Donald Trump's case. It's not really working out for him the way that those who thought he was back in the Supreme Court would have expected. But then again, all the same, I think it's an important point that was raised. We need to begin to avert our mind towards that. And long term, we need to look at curing this thing by simply putting a limit on the number of Supreme Court justices that we have and putting some more rules that will remove some of the discretion that is already, lying with the President and the Chief Justice, so that we can get a better understanding that this is how things are, this is where we're going.
So we're showing you pictures of the courtroom. What it is really is that everybody else is ready.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the panel seated, you can't start or you can continue with the process. So we're all waiting. We're all waiting for the judges who will be making the call, really, if you like. But this is the second time that we're seeing this live transmission of this process. The first time, remember, Daniel, was part of the John Mahama's legal team's application, but they couldn't even move that because the courts apparently had decided on their own that they were going to transmit the process. And so the first hearing was telecast live. So raising or making that application became insignificant. But of course, they went on to hear the second issue, which was correction of errors in one of the reliefs being sought by John Dramani Mahama, and that was granted.
Yeah.
The court gave them, this was last Thursday, 4 p.m. that day, to make those corrections, which they did. Gave the respondents, in this case the Electoral Commission and Mr. Kufuor, up to the following day, 4 p.m., which we're told they also, did. So we're here this Tuesday, which is the second hearing, but we haven't even gotten into the substantive matter yet. These are just the surface issues. There's also the initial objection that's been raised by the Electoral Commission and Mr. Kufuor's team. That's also yet to be heard, which essentially is the argument that Mr. Mahama doesn't even have a case at all. So don't go into full trial. On the face of it, you can dismiss this case.
Which is not an unexpected move from Mr. Kufuor and the Electoral Commission's legal team. You expect them to go at it with every weapon in their arsenal, if I can use that expression. And but I must say, I was quite surprised to see the former president's team apply that the legal proceedings are telecast live. Remember that there was a manual of adjudicature put out before election 2020. And as part of the rules, we came to understand that if there is an election petition for the presidential poll, we will see it telecast live. And so I know that they probably wanted to be sure, wanted to probably make that point. But in that case, the justices of the Supreme Court did not even find it necessary to hear that case. They said, look, it's moot, it's dead on arrival. We have already made our decisions. In other words, you can't come and tell us what to do in our court. Yeah, but
it was still a smart strategy to still put in that application, because you never know. You could have it being spelled out in the manual, but it's still their discretion, if you like, to say that we're going to do this or not. So just in case you put in some things. Exactly.
That is a good point that you make there, I must say. I was just going to comment on how important it is that we have things like this telecast. It's a very sensitive time. Like I said, everyone is watching this with bated breath. I think one of the things that has made it very good, apart from shortening the time, is allowing everyone to watch it, so that when everyone sees firsthand what is happening there, it removes the opportunity for mistrust of the process. They always say that the best sunlight is the best detergent against corruption. When everyone is seeing it, everyone then can come to their own conclusion as to whether or not this process was free and fair as the election was expected to be. It would also bring us under the hood. We'll see some of the things that went into the decisions that were made by the Electoral Commission. The NDC is not the only group of Ghanaians which had cause to question why the Electoral Commission made that mistake in the first place. And they came to correct it the next day. When we get into the details of that announcement or that declaration, and we begin to look at the Electoral Commissioner's frame of mind, the decisions that they took, how they made those computations, the NDC also offers their evidence. Ghanaians can then put this matter to bed. Because remember, when John Dramani Mahama was addressing the nation, the day that this petition was filed at the Supreme Court, he made a very poignant statement, Mamavi. He said that I want to clarify, I want to remove all doubt. Whether I won the election or not, Ghanaians must know. So as long as Ghanaians are satisfied by viewing this process from beginning to end, then we can move forward as a nation. We can be assured of the peace that we already enjoy, and our democracy will be the better off.
Well, I see that on Facebook, Daniel, there are people who are joining the conversation, but you also find every now and then that people are exchanging, so it becomes like a banter between, different people making conversations on our Facebook page. You are encouraged to join the conversation on Facebook and, of course, on Twitter as well. As we're streaming this hearing of the 2020 petition at the Supreme Court live, so you can get involved in the conversation on all our social media handles. We're live on Joy 99.7 FM if you just joined us. This is our coverage of the Supreme Court hearing of the election 2020 petition. We've seen the courts go on recess. They're yet to return to deal with the matter that has been raised by Chacha Chikata, argues strongly, but also seen very strong opposition from the two other lawyers representing the two respondents, the Electoral Commission in this case, and Mr. Akufo-Addo. And this really is the matter asking the court to allow them to serve interrogatories. They've asked some interesting questions in that, and they are asking for the returning officer in the presidential elections in 2020, in this case, Jean Mensah, to answer these specific questions. And there's been an affidavit in opposition, essentially the Electoral Commission also responding and saying that some of the questions are totally irrelevant, as they would find the answers in the petition itself. So basically that's what's been happening this morning in courts. And we will see what the ruling would be in terms of the decision that the court will make going forward from where we are. There's also another issue with a request to admit facts that John Dramani Mahama's legal team is also seeking the court to allow them to do, which they haven't touched on. So basically, this is the first issue that the court is handling this morning, Daniel.
And it's interesting that in one of the responses by the Electoral Commission, it basically said Mr. Chikata is trying to delay the process. And of course, his response there was that no, if these interrogatories are accepted, it will rather speed up the process of, the actual trial when the witnesses are being examined and re-examined. And so that's where he stands. Let's still remember that the Supreme Court has given itself 42 days to hear this case. And so they are on a clock. Of course, the argument is that, look, there's no need for you to put all that pressure on yourself. If you feel like you would need more time to hear this case, you're a master of your own rules. You can simply amend that election, that manual for adjudicator ahead of the election, and go ahead. I think it's very important that is kept in the back of our mind. Let's do this, be as thorough as possible, and then make sure that Ghanaians generally are satisfied. On another note, whilst we were talking about the comments going on our Facebook feed, I quickly dashed over to Twitter myself. I saw that Chacha Chikata is now trending at #1. He always comes out very popular after these particular cases, like in your 2012, in the case of the 2012 election petition. So we are still waiting for these judges to come back and tell us what the ruling is as far as Mr. Mahama's application is concerned.
Absolutely. So get involved. Use the hashtag #electionpetition on Twitter. So just to explain interrogatories, because the lawyers are doing their thing in the courts, we are watching and listening. I thought that we could get a little explanation in terms of the questions that Mr. Chikata and his team has put forward. So it's actually a list of questions one party sends to another as part of the discovery process, as they put it. So this is not necessarily a witness in the box where you're cross-examining. And that's the argument that the other parties in this case have been trying to make as well in objecting to the court granting this, saying that, they will get the opportunity to ask these questions during cross-examination. So court don't grant this request. But we'll see what happens in a little bit. It's about 5 more minutes to midday. We will take a breather, but definitely keep watching and listening to our coverage of the election 2020 petition hearing. Is the second hearing process.